My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm 28 years old, and I need to tell you about something that completely changed my relationship with my family forever. You know how they say blood is thicker than water? Well, let me tell you about the day I realized that sometimes the people who share your DNA can hurt you more than strangers ever could. This is a story about how my own family couldn't even show up for my college graduation, one of the biggest days of my life. But the moment they saw my $800,000 house pop up on their Facebook feed, suddenly my dad was blowing up my phone asking for help. If you've ever felt overlooked by your own family, or wondered if success really is the best revenge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because this story will show you exactly how I turned years of being ignored into the most satisfying comeback of my life. I remember staring at those empty seats during my college graduation ceremony, feeling this crushing weight in my chest. My dad, Robert Johnson, had promised he'd be there, along with my mom, Linda, and my younger brother, Jake. But when the moment came for them to celebrate one of the biggest achievements of my life, they were nowhere to be found. The excuse came later in a text message. Something came up with Jake's baseball tournament. We couldn't make it. That's when I realized I would always be second priority to them, maybe even third or fourth. The worst part wasn't just their absence. It was how normal it felt, like I should have expected it all along. That day changed something fundamental inside me, something I didn't even realize until much later. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I made myself a promise that would shape the next 5 years of my life. I told myself that if they couldn't be there for my successes, then they wouldn't be there for my failures either. From that moment on, I was going to build something so incredible that one day they'd regret not believing in me. Little did I know that this decision would lead me to create an empire that would make them question everything they thought they knew about their unreliable daughter. The drive home from graduation was the longest 2 hours of my life, and I spent every minute of it planning my next move. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for their attention, and I definitely wasn't going to let this define me. Instead, I was going to use their neglect as fuel for something bigger than any of us could imagine. That night, I started working on a plan that would eventually lead to the phone call that changed everything between us. But before I tell you about that life-changing moment, you need to understand exactly what kind of family dynamics I was dealing with. You see, my family had this pattern of treating me like I was invisible unless they needed something from me. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the one who took care of things while everyone else got to be the star. But the second I needed support or recognition, they were mysteriously busy with something more important. That graduation day wasn't an isolated incident. It was the final straw in a lifetime of feeling like I didn't belong in my own family. What happened next would prove to them that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by underestimating me. Let me paint you a picture of what my childhood looked like, because understanding my family dynamic is crucial to this story. My dad, Robert, was a construction worker who spent most of his time either at work or at my brother Jake's sporting events. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at a local grocery store and seemed to live for Jake's achievements. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and basically raised myself while everyone else focused on the golden child. If you've ever been the overlooked sibling or felt invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. This story is for you, and I promise it gets so much better. From the time I was about 12 years old, I learned that love in the Johnson household was conditional. If Jake scored a touchdown, the whole family celebrated with dinner at his favorite restaurant. If I made the honor roll, I got a, "That's nice, honey," while Mom continued scrolling through her phone. Family vacations were planned around Jake's baseball schedule, family dinners revolved around Jake's day at school, and family photos featured Jake front and center while I stood awkwardly in the background. I became an expert at making myself small, at not asking for too much, at being grateful for whatever scraps of attention came my way. The pattern became so normal that I started believing I wasn't worthy of their attention or support. When I announced I wanted to go to college for digital marketing, Dad laughed and said it sounded like playing on computers all day. When I got accepted into a prestigious program with a partial scholarship, Mom said she hoped I knew what I was doing because they couldn't help much with expenses. Every achievement I made was met with skepticism or indifference. while Jake's mediocre grades were celebrated like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. I was drowning in a sea of emotional neglect, and I didn't even realize it was happening. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. All that neglect actually created something powerful inside me. While my family was busy focusing on Jake's every move, I was quietly developing skills that would eventually make me more successful than any of them could imagine. I learned to be self-reliant, to problem solve on my own, and to create my own validation instead of depending on others. Those lonely nights working on school projects while everyone else watched Jake's games taught me discipline and focus that money can't buy. By the time I graduated high school, I had already started building what would become my empire, though I didn't know it at the time. I was creating content online, learning about digital marketing, and developing skills that my family couldn't even understand, let alone appreciate. The seeds of my revenge were planted not out of hatred, but out of necessity. I had to become extraordinary because being ordinary wasn't enough to get noticed in my own home. What I didn't realize was that this journey of self-reliance would lead to the most satisfying moment of my entire life. That graduation morning started like any other day, but I was buzzing with excitement because I genuinely believed this time would be different. I had sent them the invitation weeks in advance, called to remind them about the date, and even offered to save them seats in the front row. My mom, Linda, had seemed genuinely interested on the phone, asking about what I'd be wearing and when the ceremony started. Dad even said he was proud of me and that he wouldn't miss it for the world. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I actually mattered to them, like maybe this achievement was big enough to finally get their attention. I woke up that morning and spent extra time getting ready, picking out the perfect dress to wear under my cap and gown. I imagined taking photos with them afterward, maybe going out for a celebratory lunch like normal families do. I even practiced what I'd say in my thank you speech if I got called up for academic honors. The whole morning felt like Christmas morning when you're a kid, that buzzing anticipation that something wonderful is about to happen. I kept checking my phone for messages from them, expecting updates about their drive to campus or questions about parking. But as the ceremony began and I scanned the audience, that familiar sinking feeling started creeping in. I saw other families with their cameras ready, holding signs with their graduate's name. Some even had balloons. I kept looking back at the section where I told them to sit, hoping maybe they were just running late. Every few minutes, I'd crane my neck to check if they had arrived, making excuses in my head about traffic or last-minute complications. The hope was so painful because part of me knew, deep down, that they probably weren't coming. When my name was called and I walked across that stage, I looked out into the crowd one more time. The empty seats where my family should have been felt like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to smile for the photographer. I could see other graduates hugging their families afterward, taking pictures, celebrating together. Meanwhile, I stood there alone in my cap and gown, checking my phone for any explanation, any excuse, anything that would make this hurt less. The silence from my phone was somehow worse than any cruel words they could have said. That's when I realized that no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked or how successful I became, I would always be competing with Jake's baseball games and whatever else they deemed more important. The text message that came 3 hours later, "Something came up with Jake's tournament, we couldn't make it," felt like the final confirmation of what I had always suspected. I wasn't their priority, I wasn't worth rearranging their schedule for, and I probably never would be. But you know what? That moment of crushing disappointment was exactly what I needed to stop depending on them for validation and start building something that would make them regret this day forever. After that graduation fiasco, I made a decision that would completely transform my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. I decided I was done waiting for my family to notice me, done begging for their attention, and definitely done letting their opinion of me define my self-worth. If they couldn't see my potential, then I'd prove it to the world without them. Have you ever reached that breaking point where you realize you have to choose between staying stuck or completely changing your life? If you have, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button because this journey of self-discovery is about to get intense, and I want you to be part of this community of people who refuse to let others dim their light. The first thing I did was move to a different city, about 3 hours away from my hometown. I found a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford, but it was mine. completely mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living under their roof, following their rules, or competing for their attention. The silence in that little apartment wasn't the painful silence of being ignored. It was the peaceful silence of finally being free to focus on myself. I remember sitting on the floor of my empty apartment that first night, eating takeout Chinese food, and feeling more hopeful than I had in years. I threw myself into building my career with an intensity that surprised even me. Every rejection letter, every failed job interview, every setback became fuel for my determination instead of reasons to give up. I started freelancing in digital marketing while working a part-time job at a local coffee shop, spending every free moment learning new skills and building my portfolio. While my family was probably assuming I was struggling and would come crawling back home, I was actually laying the foundation for something bigger than any of them could imagine. The loneliness was real, but it was productive loneliness, the kind that forces you to become your own best friend and biggest supporter. What my family didn't understand was that all those years of being overlooked had actually prepared me for this moment perfectly. I was already used to working alone, to motivating myself, to celebrating my own victories. While other people my age were still depending on their parents for emotional support and financial help, I was developing the kind of independence that money can't buy. Every small win, landing my first freelance client, getting my first positive review, making my first $1,000 month, felt like a victory not just for me, but against everyone who had underestimated me. The beautiful thing about building success on your own is that nobody can take credit for it or diminish it. Every dollar I earned, every client I landed, every skill I developed was 100% mine. I wasn't riding on anyone's coattails or benefiting from family connections. I was creating something from scratch through pure determination and hard work. Little did I know that this journey of self-reliance would eventually lead to the moment when my dad would be calling me, asking for help, completely unaware that his unsuccessful daughter had become more financially stable than he ever was. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, let me tell you about how I discovered my true calling. About 6 months into my journey of independence, I stumbled upon something that would completely change my life trajectory. I had been doing freelance marketing for small businesses, but I noticed that most of my clients had the same problem. They didn't understand social media or how to create content that actually engaged their audience. One evening, while helping a local bakery owner understand Instagram, I realized that I had developed skills that most people desperately needed, but didn't know where to find. That's when I had my light bulb moment. What if I started teaching other people what I was learning about digital marketing and content creation? It seemed almost too simple, but sometimes the best ideas are the ones hiding in plain sight. I started my first social media account dedicated to teaching digital marketing tips to small business owners. My content was nothing fancy, just me talking to my phone camera in my tiny studio apartment, sharing practical tips that I had learned through trial and error with my freelance clients. I remember being so nervous to post my first video, worried that people would think I didn't know what I was talking about. But something magical happened when I hit that post button. People actually started responding, asking questions, sharing their own struggles with digital marketing. What surprised me most was how hungry people were for authentic, easy-to-understand advice about building their online presence. While other experts were selling expensive courses and using complicated jargon, I was breaking everything down into simple, actionable steps that anyone could follow. My audience started growing slowly but steadily. First hundreds, then thousands of followers who genuinely appreciated my straightforward approach. I began to realize that my years of feeling invisible had actually taught me how to make other people feel seen and heard. The growth wasn't overnight, but it was consistent. I spent every spare moment creating content, responding to comments, and building genuine relationships with my audience. While my family probably thought I was just playing around on social media, I was actually building what would become a 6-figure business. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same family who had dismissed my college major as playing on computers had no idea that those computer skills were about to make me more successful than any of them had ever been. By the end of my first year of content creation, I had built a community of over 50,000 followers and had started monetizing through affiliate partnerships and my own digital products. The best part wasn't just the money, It was the messages from people telling me how my advice had helped them grow their businesses, quit jobs they hated, or finally understand how to market themselves online. I was making a real impact in people's lives while building financial freedom for myself. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of something that would eventually fund my dream house and lead to the phone call that would change everything with my family. The first time I made $10,000 in a single month, I literally stared at my bank account for 10 minutes thinking there had been some kind of mistake. This was more money than I had ever seen in my account at one time, and it came from something I genuinely loved doing, helping other people build their dreams online. I remember calling the bank to make sure the deposits were real, and when they confirmed everything was legitimate, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried happy tears. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about making rent, buying groceries, or whether my car would break down and leave me stranded. But here's where things got really interesting. Instead of calling my family to share this incredible milestone, I realized I had absolutely no desire to tell them about my success. The Sarah from 2 years ago would have immediately called home, desperate for their approval and recognition. But this new version of me understood that their opinion of my achievements didn't matter anymore. I had built something beautiful and profitable without their support, and sharing it with them would only give them an opportunity to minimize it or take credit for my work ethic. This financial independence felt like the ultimate revenge, not because I was trying to hurt them, but because I had finally proven to myself that I didn't need their validation to be successful. That $10,000 month quickly turned into $15,000, then $20,000. And before I knew it, I was consistently earning more in a month than my dad made in 3 months at his construction job. The money allowed me to move into a better apartment, invest in better equipment for my content creation, and start putting aside serious savings for the first time in my life. But the real victory wasn't the money itself. It was the freedom and confidence that came with knowing I could support myself completely, that I had created something valuable that the world wanted and was willing to pay for. I started dreaming bigger than I ever had before. I began looking at houses online, not as fantasy shopping, but as actual possibilities. The idea of owning my own home, a real home, not just an apartment, but a place that was completely mine, became my new obsession. Every month that my income grew, those dreams became more and more realistic. I started working with a financial advisor, learning about mortgages, and educating myself about real estate investment. My family had always rented, never owned property, and the idea that I might be the first Johnson to buy a house felt both exciting and terrifying. Within 18 months of that first $10,000 month, I had saved enough for a down payment on a house that would cost more than my parents' annual salary. The house hunting process was surreal. Walking through these beautiful homes, knowing I could actually afford them, felt like living someone else's life. When I finally found the one, a stunning modern home with huge windows, a gourmet kitchen, and a backyard perfect for the dog I planned to adopt, I knew this was more than just a house purchase. This was me officially graduating from the girl who got ignored at her own graduation to the woman who had built an empire from scratch. But I had no idea that posting a simple photo of this house on social media would trigger the phone call that would bring my family back into my life in the most unexpected way. The day I got the keys to my $800,000 house was honestly one of the best days of my entire life. I spent the whole afternoon just walking through each room, running my hands along the granite countertops, standing in the master bedroom with its walk-in closet that was bigger than my first apartment. It felt surreal that this beautiful space was actually mine. No roommates, no landlord, no parents telling me what I could or couldn't do. I decided to share this incredible milestone on Facebook with a simple photo of me holding the keys in front of my new house, captioned, "Dreams do come true when you work for them." If you've ever achieved something amazing and wanted to share it with the world, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because what happened next will blow your mind and show you exactly how success changes people's attitudes toward you. I posted that photo without thinking much about it. I was just excited and wanted to share my joy with friends and followers who had supported my journey. Within minutes, the likes and comments started pouring in from people congratulating me, asking about my business success, and sharing their own dreams of home ownership. It felt amazing to have genuine people celebrating this achievement with me. People who understood how much work had gone into making this dream a reality. For about 2 hours, I basked in all the positive energy and support from my online community. But then something strange started happening. I noticed my family members were suddenly liking the post, commenting with congratulations, and my mom Linda even shared it to her own Facebook page with the caption, "So proud of my successful daughter." This was the same woman who couldn't be bothered to attend my college graduation, and now she was publicly claiming credit for my success. My brother Jake commented, "Awesome house, sis. Can't wait to visit," as if we had maintained some close relationship over the years. The sudden attention from them felt hollow and fake, like they were trying to rewrite history. Then my phone rang, and when I saw Dad on the caller ID, my heart actually started racing. Robert Johnson, the man who had dismissed my college major and couldn't prioritize my graduation over a baseball tournament, was calling me for the first time in over 6 months. When I answered, his voice had a tone I had never heard before, a mixture of pride and something that sounded almost like desperation. "Sarah, honey, I saw your post about the house. That's incredible. I always knew you'd do something special with your life," he said, as if he hadn't spent years making me feel invisible and unimportant. The conversation quickly shifted from congratulations to questions about my business, how much money I was making, and whether I was financially comfortable these days. Then came the real reason for the call. Dad explained that he had been out of work for 3 months due to a back injury. Mom's hours at the grocery store had been cut, and Jake was struggling to pay for community college. "I hate to ask," he said, "but I was wondering if you might be able to help us out with some money. Just a loan, of course. We'd pay you back." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The same people who couldn't spare a few hours for my graduation were now asking me to spare thousands of dollars for their financial crisis. After I hung up the phone with Dad, I sat in my beautiful new kitchen feeling completely torn apart inside. Part of me, the part that still remembered being that little girl desperate for her family's love and approval, wanted to immediately transfer them whatever money they needed. After all, they were my family. And isn't that what family is supposed to do for each other? I found myself thinking about all those childhood moments when I had fantasized about being successful enough to take care of everyone, to be the hero who swooped in and saved the day. Maybe this was my chance to finally earn their love and respect, to show them what a good daughter I really was. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger over these past few years of independence, was absolutely furious at their audacity. Where were they when I was eating ramen noodles for dinner every night while building my business? Where were they when I was working 16-hour days, teaching myself new skills, and building my empire from nothing? They had shown zero interest in my struggles, my journey, or my gradual success. But now that I had achieved something impressive, suddenly I was worth their attention. The fact that their first real conversation with me in months was basically asking for money felt like a slap in the face. I spent the next few days going back and forth in my mind, creating mental lists of pros and cons. On one hand, I could afford to help them without it significantly impacting my lifestyle, and maybe this could be the beginning of healing our relationship. On the other hand, giving them money felt like rewarding their years of neglect and teaching them that they could continue to ignore me until they needed something. I kept thinking about how they would probably go back to treating me like I was invisible once their financial crisis was resolved, and the cycle would continue with me being useful only when convenient. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't really about the money at all. It was about respect, recognition, and the fundamental question of what I deserved from the people who claimed to love me. If I gave them money now, would they finally see me as valuable? Or would they just see me as a convenient ATM? Would this gesture bridge the gap between us? Or would it just enable them to continue taking me for granted? The uncertainty was eating me alive, and I found myself unable to focus on work or enjoy my beautiful new home. That's when I had a conversation with my best friend Maria, who had been watching this family drama unfold for years. She asked me one simple question that changed everything. "Sarah, if these were strangers who had treated you the exact same way, would you even consider giving them money?" The answer was so obvious it hit me like a lightning bolt. Absolutely not. I would never reward people who had consistently shown me disrespect and indifference. So why should family be any different? That question helped me realize that my desire to help them wasn't coming from a healthy place of love and generosity. It was coming from a wounded place of still trying to earn their approval. And that's when I knew exactly what I needed to do, though it would be the hardest decision I had ever made. After days of wrestling with this decision, I finally reached a clarity that surprised even me. I wasn't going to give my family the money they were asking for, but I also wasn't going to let this moment pass without doing something meaningful with my success. That conversation with Maria had opened my eyes to something important. I had the power to use my money in a way that would actually make a difference in the world, rather than just enabling people who had consistently shown me disrespect. I decided that instead of giving my dad the $15,000 he had asked for, I was going to donate $25,000 to a local charity that helped underprivileged kids get school supplies and support for their education. The more I thought about this plan, the more right it felt in my soul. These kids reminded me of myself growing up, overlooked, undervalued, and desperately needing someone to believe in their potential. The charity I chose worked specifically with children from broken homes or families that couldn't provide emotional or financial support for their education. I had been one of those kids, just lucky enough to figure out how to make it on my own. But not every kid has that opportunity, and I realized that my success could be a lifeline for children who needed it most. I spent an entire evening researching the organization, reading testimonials from kids they had helped, and learning about their programs. They provided everything from basic school supplies to tutoring, mentorship, and even college scholarship funds. When I called to arrange the donation, the program director was so shocked by the amount that she asked me to repeat it 3 times. She told me that $25,000 would fund their after-school program for an entire semester, helping over 200 kids who otherwise wouldn't have access to homework help, meals, and mentorship. The day I made that donation was the day I truly understood what success was supposed to feel like. It wasn't about the house, the car, or even the money itself. It was about having the power to create positive change in the world. When I got the thank you photos from the charity showing kids with their new backpacks full of supplies, kids whose faces lit up because someone believed in their education, I knew I had made the right choice. These children were getting opportunities that might change the entire trajectory of their lives, and that felt infinitely more valuable than helping my family out of a financial situation they had created through poor planning. But here's where the story gets really interesting. I decided that I wasn't going to keep this donation a secret. I was going to tell my family exactly what I had done with the money they thought should be theirs. I knew this decision would probably end our relationship permanently, but I also knew that staying true to my values was more important than maintaining a fake peace with people who had never truly valued me. The phone call I was about to make would change everything between us, and I was ready for whatever consequences came next. The phone call with my dad was one of the most difficult conversations I had ever had, but also one of the most liberating. When I told him that I wouldn't be giving them money but had instead donated $25,000 to help underprivileged children with their education, the silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and full of disbelief. "You gave $25,000 to strangers instead of helping your own family?" I tried to explain that these weren't just strangers. They were kids who reminded me of myself, kids who needed someone to believe in them. Have you ever had to choose between doing what's popular and doing what's right? If you faced that kind of difficult decision, make sure to subscribe and like this video, because this story shows exactly why standing up for your values is always worth it, even when it costs you everything. Dad's reaction was everything I had expected and worse. He accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and trying to show off with my money instead of taking care of family. "After everything we did for you growing up," he said, "this is how you repay us?" The irony of that statement almost made me laugh. What exactly had they done for me growing up besides consistently show me that I wasn't a priority? When I pointed out that they couldn't even attend my graduation, he dismissed it as ancient history and said I was being dramatic and petty. My mom, Linda, got on the phone next, and her reaction was even more painful because it came with tears and guilt-tripping. She told me I had changed since becoming successful, that money had made me cold and heartless. Family is supposed to stick together, she sobbed. But you care more about strangers than your own blood. When I tried to explain that helping those kids felt like honoring the child I used to be, the one they had overlooked, she cut me off and said I was making excuses for being selfish. The conversation ended with my dad telling me that if I couldn't be there for family when they needed me, then maybe I shouldn't expect them to be there for me either. The threat was supposed to hurt, but instead, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. Dad, I said quietly, you haven't been there for me in years. The difference is now I don't need you to be. When I hung up that phone, I knew I had just severed ties with my family permanently, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely aligned with my values and proud of who I had become. What happened next surprised me more than anything. I didn't feel sad or regretful about the end of our relationship. Instead, I felt free, like I had finally stopped carrying around the weight of trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it unconditionally. I had chosen to use my success to create positive change in the world rather than enable dysfunction, and that choice revealed everything I needed to know about the difference between who I had become and who they still were. The kids who received those school supplies and educational support would never know that their opportunities came from one family's inability to understand love, but I would always know that I had turned my pain into someone else's hope. In the weeks that followed that final phone call with my family, I found myself reflecting deeply on what it really means to grow up without emotional support from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The silence from their end wasn't painful anymore. It was actually peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't walking on eggshells, wondering if I was good enough, successful enough, or worthy enough of their attention. I realized that growing up without their support had actually been a gift, though it took me years to see it that way. It forced me to develop an inner strength and self-reliance that most people never have to cultivate. I started thinking about all the skills I had developed precisely because I couldn't depend on my family for guidance, encouragement, or resources. While other people my age were calling their parents for advice, I was learning to trust my own judgment and make decisions based on my own research and intuition. While others had family connections to help them get jobs or opportunities, I was building my network from scratch and learning to sell myself based on merit alone. The independence that came from being emotionally neglected had actually prepared me for entrepreneurial success in ways that a supportive family might not have. The most profound realization was understanding that their lack of support said absolutely nothing about my worth and everything about their capacity to recognize potential. I had spent years thinking there was something wrong with me, that maybe I really wasn't special or talented enough to deserve their attention. But building my business and achieving financial independence had proven that their assessment of me was completely wrong. They couldn't see my potential because they were limited by their own fears, insecurities, and narrow definition of success. Their rejection wasn't a reflection of my capabilities. It was a reflection of their inability to dream bigger than their own small world. Looking back, I could see how every moment of neglect had actually contributed to my success story. Every time they dismissed my ideas, I became more determined to prove them wrong. Every time they prioritized Jake over me, I learned to prioritize myself and my goals. Every time they made me feel invisible, I developed the drive to become impossible to ignore. The pain of their indifference had become the fuel for my ambition, and I was grateful for that transformation, even though the process had been incredibly difficult. What surprised me most was realizing that I didn't actually want their approval anymore. Not because I was bitter, but because I had genuinely outgrown the need for external validation. The woman who had built a six-figure business, bought her dream house, and used her success to help others didn't need Robert and Linda Johnson's permission to feel proud of herself. I had become my own biggest supporter, my own source of encouragement, and my own definition of success. That independence was worth more than any amount of family approval could ever be, and I finally understood that their inability to support me had actually set me free to become exactly who I was meant to be. The donation I made to help those underprivileged kids marked a turning point in how I understood the purpose of success. Money and achievements weren't just about personal satisfaction or proving people wrong. They were about having the power to create positive change in the world. When I received the follow-up report from the charity showing how my $25,000 had impacted over 200 children, I realized that this was what success was supposed to feel like. These kids were getting tutoring, school supplies, and mentorship that could literally change the trajectory of their entire lives, and I had made that possible through my hard work and determination. The contrast between how I felt about that donation versus how I would have felt about giving my family money was striking. If I had given my dad the $15,000 he asked for, it would have been a band-aid solution to a problem that would likely recur because they hadn't addressed the underlying issues that created their financial crisis. But investing in these children's education was creating lasting change that would compound over time. These kids would go on to achieve things they never thought possible, maybe even starting their own businesses or helping other kids in similar situations. That's the kind of impact that makes success meaningful. I started researching other ways I could use my growing wealth to create positive change, and I discovered that there were countless opportunities to make a difference. I could fund scholarships for students who reminded me of my younger self, support programs that helped people start their own businesses, or contribute to organizations that provided resources for people trying to escape toxic family situations. The more I learned about strategic philanthropy, the more excited I became about the possibility of using my success as a force for good in the world. This shift in perspective also changed how I thought about continuing to grow my business. It wasn't just about accumulating more wealth for its own sake. It was about expanding my capacity to help others. Every new client I landed, every successful campaign I ran, every dollar I earned represented more opportunities to invest in causes that mattered to me. My business success became directly connected to my ability to create positive impact, which made the work feel more purposeful and motivating than ever before. The beautiful irony was that choosing to help strangers instead of my family had actually taught me what unconditional love really looks like. Those kids I was helping through the charity didn't need to prove they deserved my support. They deserved it simply because they were human beings with potential who needed someone to believe in them. That's the kind of love I had always wanted from my family, but never received. By giving that kind of unconditional support to others, I was healing something inside myself, while also making the world a little bit better. That's when I knew I had found my true purpose. And it had nothing to do with getting revenge on my family, and everything to do with becoming the person I had always been meant to be. 6 months after that final phone call with my family, I received some news that confirmed I had made the right decision. My friend Maria, who still lived in our hometown, told me that my dad Robert was telling people around town that I had turned my back on family and become too good for my own blood. What he wasn't mentioning was that he had to take out a high-interest loan to cover their financial emergency, which put them in an even worse position than before. If you've ever wondered whether cutting toxic people out of your life really works, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button, because this story proves that sometimes the best thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their bad choices and poor planning. Meanwhile, I was watching the kids from the charity I had donated to thrive in ways that filled my heart with joy. The program director sent me regular updates with photos and stories of children who were excelling in school, gaining confidence, and dreaming bigger than they ever had before. One little girl named Emma, who reminded me so much of myself at that age, had gone from barely passing her classes to making honor roll after getting consistent tutoring and support. Another boy named Marcus had started his own small business selling handmade crafts after learning entrepreneurship skills through the program's mentorship component. The contrast between my family's continued dysfunction and these children's growth was striking. My family was still stuck in the same patterns of poor financial planning, blame, and expecting others to solve their problems. But these kids were learning skills that would serve them for life: how to study effectively, how to set goals, how to believe in themselves even when others didn't. My $25,000 had created a ripple effect that would impact not just these children, but their future families and communities. That's the difference between enabling dysfunction and investing in potential. About a year later, I learned through Maria that Jake had dropped out of community college and was living back home with no job, no goals, and no motivation to change his situation. My parents were now supporting a grown man who had never learned to take responsibility for his own life because they had always made excuses for him and cleaned up his messes. The same parents who couldn't afford to help with my college expenses were now paying for Jake's car insurance, cell phone, and daily expenses, while he played video games and complained about how unfair life was. The most satisfying part wasn't that my family was struggling. I genuinely didn't wish them harm. The satisfying part was knowing that I had chosen to use my resources to create positive change in the world instead of perpetuating a cycle of dysfunction. While they were still stuck in the same small-minded thinking that had held them back for years, I was part of something bigger and more meaningful. Every success story from those kids felt like validation that I had chosen love over obligation, impact over appearances, and growth over comfort. They had taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about mutual respect, support, and wanting the best for each other, even when it's difficult. Looking back on this entire journey, from that crushing disappointment at graduation to the moment I chose to help strangers instead of family, I realized that every painful experience was preparing me for something greater than I could have imagined. The family that couldn't show up for my graduation inadvertently gave me the greatest gift possible. They forced me to become completely self-reliant, emotionally independent, and crystal clear about my values. If they had been supportive and loving, I might never have developed the drive and determination that led to my success. Their neglect became my superpower, and their rejection became my redirection toward a more meaningful life. The most important lesson I learned is that you can't change people who don't want to change, but you can control how you respond to their choices. For years, I had been trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it unconditionally, and that pursuit was keeping me stuck in patterns of people-pleasing and self-doubt. The moment I stopped needing their approval was the moment I became truly free to create the life I wanted. Success isn't about proving anything to people who couldn't see your worth. It's about using your gifts to make a positive impact on the world. Building my business and achieving financial independence wasn't really about the money, though the security was incredible. It was about proving to myself that I could create something valuable, that I could trust my own judgment, and that I could use my success to lift others up instead of just accumulating wealth for its own sake. Every child whose life was changed through that charity donation represents a piece of my own healing journey. By giving them the support and belief that I had always wanted from my family, I was healing the wounded child inside myself. The phone call from my dad asking for money was actually a blessing in disguise because it forced me to make a choice that defined who I wanted to be as a successful person. I could have taken the easy path, given them money, and hoped it would finally earn their love and respect. Instead, I chose the harder but more meaningful path of using my success to create lasting change in the lives of people who truly needed and deserved help. That choice revealed everything about my character and theirs, and I'm proud of the woman I became through that decision. Today, I wake up in my beautiful house knowing that every success I've achieved is genuinely mine, earned through hard work, determination, and staying true to my values even when it cost me relationships. The kids who benefited from that donation are now thriving in school, dreaming bigger dreams, and learning that someone believes in their potential. My family is still stuck in the same patterns of dysfunction and blame, but that's their choice to make. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even if they're family, and instead use your resources to create positive change where it can actually make a difference. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to know that whatever situation you're facing with toxic family members, unsupportive people, or anyone who makes you feel like you're not enough, you have the power to change your story. My journey from being the overlooked daughter to becoming financially independent and using my success for good isn't unique. It's possible for anyone willing to do the work and stay committed to their values. The same skills that helped me build a six-figure business are skills you can learn, and the same determination that got me through years of family rejection is strength that exists inside you too. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button because I'm going to keep sharing stories and strategies that prove you don't need anyone's permission to create an extraordinary life. I want to challenge you to think about how you're currently responding to people who don't value or support you. Are you still trying to earn their approval? Or are you channeling that energy into building something amazing for yourself? Are you settling for relationships where you give more than you receive? Or are you surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your successes and support your dreams? The answers to these questions will determine whether you stay stuck in patterns that don't serve you or break free to create the life you actually want. Consider this your permission slip to stop feeling guilty about outgrowing people who can't or won't grow with you. Family dysfunction, toxic relationships, and unsupportive environments don't have to define your future unless you let them. You can use every rejection, every disappointment, and every moment of being underestimated as fuel for becoming the person you were always meant to be. The world needs what you have to offer, and the people who can't see your potential don't deserve front-row seats to your success story. Your success story is waiting to be written, and it starts with deciding that you're worth fighting for, even if you have to fight alone. Every skill you develop, every boundary you set, and every choice you make to prioritize your growth over other people's comfort is an investment in the person you're becoming. The most beautiful revenge against people who underestimated you isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so focused on your purpose and impact that their opinions become completely irrelevant to your happiness and success. I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between enabling dysfunction and staying true to your values? What's one toxic relationship or limiting belief you're ready to release so you can create space for something better? Remember, every expert was once a beginner, every successful person was once unknown, and every person living their dream life was once exactly where you are right now. Subscribe for more stories about turning pain into purpose, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll share exactly how I built my six-figure business from scratch with no family support, no business background, and nothing but determination and a laptop.